Welcome to the Yas Technique for Vector Graphics and Adobe Illustrator. My name is Jeff Yas, and I'm so excited you have joined me on this creative journey. This is Chapter 1, Getting Started. I'm going to give a brief overview of what we hope to accomplish. We have a lot to do in this first lesson before we actually get started with design. First, we're going to talk about our general goals for the course, what we hope to get out of it. Then I'm going to describe a little more in detail what we're going to do in the class, what it's all about. I'm going to introduce myself. Then we'll get into vectors themselves. We'll talk about what is a vector graphic and why our brains tend to work creatively very well with the kind of flat graphics that vectors are so good at. We're also going to debunk a few myths and get around some of the commonly held ideas that may not really be true about software like Adobe Illustrator or other vector software. We're also going to then go over a few alternatives to Adobe Illustrator. If you're not using Adobe Illustrator and you'd like to use an alternative, we have some options for you there. And then we're going to go over a little gear topic. So we'll talk about mice, some power mice, some alternatives to the Apple mice, and we will also go over keyboards, a few keyboards that you might look at for alternative design experiences, ways that you can enhance your workflow. So that's it. That's the getting started lesson. That's all before we even get into Adobe Illustrator itself. I just want to introduce the topics, introduce myself, talk about vectors, and then talk a little bit about gear, and then we'll keep on moving. So let's get started. I'm so excited. Once again, my name is Jeff Yas. This is the Yas Technique for Vector Graphics and Adobe Illustrator, Chapter 1. Let's get on with some goals. In this course, you will learn how to create vector graphics using the Yas Technique, a powerfully simple method which eliminates distractions and focuses on a few core skills. This is not like other Illustrator courses. We won't try to squeeze in every tool, shortcut, and skill. We are focused on finding your creativity with vector graphics using the pen tool, while trying to block out almost everything else. The Yas Technique rests on the philosophy that repeated use of this one tool builds an immediate direct connection between the digital space and your imagination. The course is organized around 3 main projects, which involve making original vector art with Illustrator's core tools. However, before diving into these projects, we will spend some time installing the software and customizing our workspace. After that setup, we'll create a template that can be used as your canvas for all 3 projects and beyond. But first, let me introduce myself. Hello! My name is Jeff Yas, and I am a brand identity designer from Brooklyn, New York. I specialize in turning stories into engaging digital art. My own style is colorful and geometric, with roots in the Bauhaus, Deco, and pop art movements. I'm also a graphic design educator with a focus on creativity in the Adobe suite. You can check out my work at yasgraphics.com and at yasgraphical on Instagram. What are vector graphics? Good question. They are points, lines, curves, and shapes that are based on math. Unlike raster graphics based on pixels, vector graphics don't lose quality when resized. Vectors are easy on the brain. Your brain tends to like simplicity or crave things that are simple to conceive, and I think 2 dimensions versus 3 dimensions is the perfect way to enter into digital art space. So when we open up a picture of a brain in Photoshop, for example, and we have shadows and slight tones and things that fade gently into one another and a sense of depth and photorealism, there's all kinds of additional considerations that the brain has to consider when thinking about being creative. Whereas in 2 dimensions, in a program like Adobe Illustrator, where you aren't thinking so much about photorealism, but you're sort of getting closer to an essential concept of something, and your brain, I think, can more readily respond to that kind of environment and come up with interesting new ideas and concepts in a way that really responds to like a beginner's brain when we come to creativity or software. And I think it's a perfect first step for someone entering into this environment. So I think for that reason, 2 dimensions in vector graphics versus 3 dimensions in pixel graphics is a great place for us to start. And that's why I say our brain loves vector graphics. We'll learn more about that as we get into it. Let's debunk the rumors. There is a common perception among beginning graphic designers that Adobe Illustrator is complex and really just for people that have already become illustrators. But many of us discover ourselves creatively in Adobe Illustrator. That could be your first step. It's always good for us to have, the hand trained with drafting, and so I encourage everyone to be drawing all the time. Of course, my pencil is my favorite tool in real life. However, I have discovered a lot of my creativity by playing around in Illustrator, by experimenting, by using the tools that it is created to help and enhance creativity. So it's not something like where you have to have an idea and then just do it in Illustrator. Sometimes Illustrator gives you the idea. Sometimes it puts you in the position to have a spontaneous creative moment. So Illustrator is not for illustrators only. Also, vectors aren't necessarily technical. It sounds like a technical word. I know it has other meanings, but in our space, vectors simply means geometrical artwork that's based on math points on a grid as opposed to pixel based. And we'll talk more about that. And also, people tend to think the pen tool sucks. It's a very difficult tool. Well, it's not so much. It's difficult. It's different. It's different than almost every other tool. However, that would be my desert island tool. That's the one tool that's going to save you. It will become your best friend. So as opposed to sucking, it actually kind of rocks. So we need the pen tool. We love the pen tool. It's part of the family. We just have to get used to being around it and using it in the right way. But once we are in command of the pen tool, it becomes the central tool to our creativity and to our ability to work not just in Adobe Illustrator, but also in Adobe Photoshop and many other programs as well. So the pen tool, in fact, does not suck. In terms of alternatives to Adobe Illustrator, many of us are subscribed to the Adobe's Creative Cloud, which is a monthly paid service and gets you access to all of Adobe's programs. And especially if you're a student or educator, it becomes even more affordable. So that is the first place I would explore, because I think Adobe Illustrator is something that many of us just are going to need to know at some point. But if you are not interested in signing up for the Creative Cloud, you have Sketch as a great alternative. I think you pay one time for Sketch. Affinity Designer, also on the iPad. Corel Draw is ancient, but still around. Inkscape. Adobe has a kind of smaller version of Illustrator called Adobe Illustrator Draw, which is worth looking at. Adobe Capture, which I believe is just on the phone. Design Evo. These are a few places that you can look for alternatives, but there are a lot of vector programs which are being used, especially Sketch and Affinity Designer, as alternatives to Adobe Illustrator. All right, let's talk about your mouse. It's extremely important. There are times when we can get by without one using a laptop trackpad, for example. However, long term, I strongly suggest investing in an external mouse that feels good to you. Many people start with the Apple wireless mice. They're well designed. They don't take up a lot of room. Of course, they're wireless, and they have the trackpad built into them, which is a multi-gesture trackpad, so you can do things like single and double and triple finger swipes and things like that. For someone like myself, that adds a little bit of play to the finger experience, and so I would rather have more of a fixed kind of old school connection with my hands and the device. So I go with a wired mouse without a trackpad. So something like the Steel series mice are extremely well made, ergonomic, but not too fancy. I find that gets the job done, and there's a scroll wheel, and they're a little customizable for sure, and it's basically a gaming mouse. So then you have the Logitech B100, which I also recommend, but that's in general, Logitech makes good products. So I would, those are three companies that I would start with. But if you're looking to go outside the Apple universe, I'd start with the SteelSeries as a power user and the Logitech for affordability. Thank you so much for following along with the Getting Started lesson, Lesson 1. We are now going to head into Lesson 2, Getting Ready. We're going to make sure that you all have Adobe Illustrator installed and talk about how important our hand positioning is for success. We're going to discuss some shortcuts and wrap it up with an introduction to the pen tool, which is sort of the center of our tools in Adobe Illustrator for this course. So once again, thank you so much for following along with our Getting Started lesson. Now we're going to head into Getting Ready. See you in the next lesson.